What's up guys, it's Endymion, and today I want to talk about one of the biggest mysteries in the Final Fantasy franchise and what could have caused it. Today I want to talk about the world of Ivalice, the setting of games such as Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy XII. To start, the setting of Final Fantasy Tactics depicts a world reminiscent of medieval times. Castles, drawbridges, swords and shields, and so on. Tactics' world, however, is largely different in many ways to Final Fantasy XII, which takes place far earlier in the timeline to Tactics. In 12, the world of Ivalice is vibrant and full of many different races besides humans like in Tactics, or Humes as they're known in Final Fantasy XII. We see the bunny-eared Vieras, the lizard Bangas, the Numos, Moogles, and more. The world of Ivalice is teeming with life and cultures, all existing with one another in varying levels of harmony. But between Final Fantasy XII and Tactics, there's an event only referred to in name as the Cataclysm. It's an event that happens roughly, as far as we know, about 1200 years before the beginning of Final Fantasy Tactics. And this cataclysm, in all its horror, led to an event so catastrophic and horrible that it ruined the world of Ivalice and left only the human race left in its aftermath. That means all the Vieras, Bangles, Numos, Moogles, and more all seemingly disappeared as if they never existed at all. Of course, the first thought is that, well, Tactics was made well over a decade before 12 was even in a concept stage, so races and such never existed to the initial creation of Ivalice. But Square Enix deliberately decided to add an absurd amount of layers of culture and story to a world that is eventually stripped of almost all of its splendor by this eventual mysterious Cataclysm event. So what caused it? One of the most prevalent connections between Tactics and 12 is that of the Espers, or what Final Fantasy XII's version of summons are called. Espers are mystical beings of immense power, with each Esper being capable of wondrous and terrible things. Each Esper also coincides with one of the Zodiacs, such as Hashmal belonging to the Zodiac sign of Leo, or Zalera, the Death Seraph, belonging to that of the Gemini sign. We know that in Final Fantasy XII that the world of Ivalice is governed and seemingly controlled by a race of mysterious godlike beings known as the Occuria. These elusive deities created the Espers and are largely responsible for the overall plot of Final Fantasy XII's story. The Occuria also, strangely enough, seem very similar in concept to that of the classic black mages of other Final Fantasy games. Their mist-like sunken dark faces with glowing golden eyes are definitely an homage or direct connection to the iconic idea of the Black Mages. The Occuria are also similar to that of the race known as Magi from Final Fantasy IX, but I'll leave the Magi for a future video. Anyways, these Espers eventually rebel against the Occuria and are led by the strongest of the Espers, which is Ultima, the High Seraph and the scion of the Virgo Zodiac. Ultima and her brethren, however, are defeated by the Occuria and are sealed away for eternity, only to be used by summoners that are bound to each Esper. In Final Fantasy Tactics, after the mysterious Cataclysm, the Espers seemingly lose the ability to exist in a physical form until they are able to possess the host via a piece of Auracite, which is basically a holy stone of magical power. They're also referred to as Zodiac Stones in Tactics. The Espers in Tactics aren't called Espers, however, and instead go by Lucavi, and are the main villains of Final Fantasy Tactics. The Lucavi are some of the only beings, apparently anyway, that exist after the Great Cataclysm, and the Occuria, the creators of the Espers or Lucavi, are nowhere to be seen or mentioned in Tactics, leading me to a whole myriad of questions or theories. So what was the Cataclysm? One of the more tantalizing theories I've kept in my head for a while is that the Cataclysm is brought upon the world of Ivalice due to the execution of a very mysterious character in the Ivalice timeline. That character's name is Saint Ajora Glabados. Ajora was the founder of the Church of Glabados and was hailed by the people of Ivalice as being a child of the gods, or perhaps a child of the Occuria, since again, Tactics was made with this lore in mind well over a decade before 12 was even conceptualized. Ajora performed many miracles in his brief life, as he was able to walk on 2 feet as soon as he was born and pointed to a well that ended up being inflicted with a plague that killed villagers. People took notice to how a mere child was able to sense corruption, and Ajora's celebrity and renown became known, and eventually Ajora gained followers and acolytes praising and worshipping him in a similar fashion to that of Jesus Christ. Ajora was using his power to secretly gather the Zodiac Stone so he could summon the Lucavi, and it's eventually revealed that Ajora was the host for Ultima, the Esper who led the rebellion against the Occuria in the first place, all those years ago, but was ultimately defeated and banished. It should also be stated that one of the Occuria rebelled against their kin and helped the main villain of Final Fantasy XII, Vayne Solador, was an Occuria named Venat. Venat directly spoke and became friends with humans in Ivalice to influence history, and in my opinion, once Venat seemingly disappears from Ivalice after the final battle in Final Fantasy XII, my theory is that Venat never really died, but instead chose to maybe become human in order to live amongst the mortal races of Ivalice instead of living amongst his fellow Occuria in their immortal, delusional realm. It should also be said that the Occuria lose the ability to control the mortal races after Final Fantasy XII, as the Sun Crystal, a gigantic crystal that is capable of controlling living beings, is destroyed and lost after Vayne's defeat at the end of Final Fantasy XII atop the airship Bahamut. So in my theory here, I believe Venat used their godlike power and was born into the human world by its own nefarious choosing, and was born as the Saint Ajora. And Ajora was able to perform miracles and sense corruption because Ajora was in fact an Occuria. And the connections become even more clear and deep, as it's stated that Saint Ajora was outed and betrayed by Germanique, one of Ajora's closest friends and disciples to the rival religious agents at the time, and Ajora was captured and executed due to Germanique's betrayal. What's even more interesting is that Germanique would go on to live and become praised as a savior due to his help for killing Ajora in his betrayal. What's even more interesting is that in the final boss fight of Final Fantasy Tactics, Ultima, who is Saint Ajora, tells Ramza, the main character of Final Fantasy Tactics, that Ramza is, quote, "You're the descendant of the one who killed me before," directly implying that Ramza is a descendant of Germanique, making Ramza a descendant of Ivalice's version of Judas to Ajora's Jesus Christ. Once Ajora is executed by the Holy Eodoran Empire for his radical religious miracles and opposition to the Eodorans' dominant religion at the time, one of the Eodorans' entire realms, known as Mulland, is destroyed in a massive tidal wave that ends with the entire realm of Mulland sinking into the ocean. This was the start, apparently, as far as we know, of the great cataclysm that forever changed the world of Ivalice. Ajora lived 1200 years prior to the events of Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's around this same time the cataclysm of Ivalice happens as well. That can't just be a coincidence, of course, and maybe the Occuria, in their wrath of having one of their own dying by the hands of mortal men, punished the land of Ivalice with whatever remaining power they held and completely destroyed everything. Or maybe they sealed parts of the world away. We don't really know for sure, since the cataclysm is not detailed in any specific way as to what happened exactly, unfortunately. All we know is that this extinction level event was so great and horrifying that only humans were left to pick up the pieces of Ivalice in its aftermath. Airships no longer sailed the skies, the various cultures and races were lost, maybe sealed away in other realms or places for all we know, but it still means that the world Ramza and the setting for the inevitable War of the Lions that takes place in Final Fantasy Tactics' main story has no mention or evidence of the Viera, Banga, or even the Occuria ever existing. And only the Espers, or the Lucavi as they're called eventually, remain as the sole survivors of the cataclysm that changed Ivalice forever. I personally would love a game detailing what happened in this pivotal time period in Ivalice's history myself. A brutal, mature-rated Final Fantasy game, similar to that of the upcoming Final Fantasy XVI's tone, showing what happened to the world of Ivalice in the wake of Saint Ajora's death. But as of now, like the origins of the Cataclysm, the fate of the Occuria, and the whereabouts of the denizens of Ivalice, we are all left to question and wonder what happened to such an amazing world, and if it could ever, one day, be saved. Well guys, that's my video on the Cataclysm of Ivalice. I hope to make more Final Fantasy content going forward. Even if it doesn't get the same numbers or attention that my Mass Effect videos get, I'm still extremely passionate about Final Fantasy, so I hope you'll look forward to more in the future. This video was quite a bit of work, so if you could please like, comment, and subscribe to help a new YouTuber out. And thank you for 900 subscribers. It's incredible that so many people like what I'm doing. You are all really motivating me to keep doing what I'm doing, so thank you. So what other concepts would you want to see me cover in the future for Final Fantasy? Let me know in the comments below. And for all things RPGs, I'm ENDYMION, and I'll see you in the next one.